Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of The Favourite. I actually don't know where to begin. This film is a historically inaccurate film, detailing a period of life, not exactly sure when, of Queen Anne of the United Kingdom's life, and that of her friend Sarah, Lady Sarah, the Duchess of Marlborough. Um, so at this time, Queen Anne is ill-tempered as well, and is not really around much, not doing much to rule the country. So Lady Sarah of Marlborough, is it Sarah Marlborough? Yeah, the Duchess of Marlborough is basically running the country for her, more or less. And at the moment, her husband, played by Mark Gatiss, is off fighting in a war. So Lady Marlborough, Rachel Weisz, is ruling the country in the place of Queen Anne, Olivia Colman, who won an Oscar for this performance. And to be honest, earlier on you don't really see how, but later on you can understand why. So basically that's what's happening, and the two of them are very close to each other. The story is basically inspired by the rumours set by Lady Marlborough that Queen Anne and her had a lesbian relationship, or bisexual relationship at least. However, Lady Marlborough's position as Queen Anne's favourite is under threat when she takes under her wing her cousin Abigail, a former lady who's been sold, who was sold to be by her father for money, and has over time tried to regain her ladyship status, but is stuck as a servant. So she comes to work for the Duchess of Marlborough, and soon gets the attention of the Queen, and eventually she helps Marlborough to look after the Queen. And over time, Abigail, played by Emma Stone, shortly but slowly, deceitfully tries to win the Queen over in her favour, and try to get the Duchess of Marlborough out of the picture in order for Abigail to become the favourite, as well as get her ladyship status, which she sort of does, which she does by marrying a guy who is, I think, a lord or a member of parliament who is interested in her. And also at the same time, the leader of the opposition, who I think is the leader of the Conservative Party, played by Nicholas Hoult, is trying to get her to spy on the Queen, or at least the Duchess of Marlborough, for him, as he and the leader, I think it's the leader of the Liberal Democrats, one of them's the Whigs, which is the Liberal Dems. So they're kind of in a political row about the war and trying to get the Queen to, Holt's trying to not allow a tax rise, and whilst the other party it's actually not very clear which one is which party out of the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. And by the way, it's just these two parties. There's no Labour, that came in the early 1910s, and there's no other party. It's just those two. So it stayed that way until at least the early to mid 1910s, when Labour came along. Shortly afterwards, and afterwards in the 20th and 21st centuries, other parties would come along. Some parties like Labour, Conservative and Liberal Democrats continue to this day, whilst others, such as the Brexit Party, are just there and sort of redundant. But that's not important for now. But anyway, it's not very clear which parties, which people in which party here. We're not sure which one's which of the Tories and the Whigs. But apparently there was, before George I, there was a prime minister or a first minister to help Queen Anne, which I think it's Holt's character's opposition to start with, and then later on he takes over. The first actual prime minister of what we know as a prime minister today came around with George I. So this is more of an earlier type of that, and maybe not prototype, but sort of an earlier example of that. And that's basically the film. There's a political quarrel every now and again, and Lady Marlborough and Abigail are fighting for Queen Anne's affections and to become her favourite. Whilst Abigail is also slowly building up her status as a lady. So that's basically the plot. And as mentioned, Abigail's a bit of a manipulative character. So she's slowly but surely manipulating the Queen and Holt's character and other people in order to get what she wants and to get Marlborough out of the picture. And I have to say that this film feels like it's the most Wes Anderson feeling film, not directed by Wes Anderson. There's a lot of with the splitting up of each chapter into different chapters. There's about 14 chapters into the film. Not many of them are very long. And it just feels very Wes Anderson. There's also some weird camera angles. There's lots of great wide angles and there's a couple of great panning ones, but you also got a couple of what my sister called fish lens eyes. It's looking for a fish lens. It's just a couple of weird angles. It feels like a very artsy film, this one. So anyone who's not a fan of the current summer big budget blockbusters at the moment, this one is an artsy drama, so you might want to go to this one instead. But at the same time, there can be a bit of confusing stuff. Like, there's this bit of music. Queen Anne hears both once at a party and once going down a corridor. And after listening to it for a few seconds, she snaps and or doesn't like it. She wants to go away, or she wants them to stop or something. It's not explained what that is. It could have been some sort of past trauma, like maybe it was or some sort of past thing, like it was with like her and her husband's song, or something that she heard when having a couple of children, or what some of her children like to listen to. She had 17 children, but they all died. 16 of them either in birth or not long afterwards, and the 17th, not the 17th, just one of them lived till about 10 or 11. So she's suffered quite a lot of losses, and that's why there's bunnies in this story. Lots of about 17 rabbits or bunnies to represent each child. Although this is a more historically inaccurate bit with the rabbits. But with the music, it's not actually established what the trauma behind it is. Why she doesn't like it after hearing it for a few seconds. She starts liking it, but afterwards doesn't. So it's not exactly made clear what that is. Maybe if it was revealed later. I think Coleman does a great job with the different mood swings that the Queen is in, because every other moment she's in a different mood. One time she's happy, quite fun, and energetic. Well, not energetic, but interested and can have a nice conversation. The next she could be angry, upset, grouchy, or sick, very unwell. She tends to be an unwell person in this film, and I think Coleman does a good job there. Rachel Weisz is really great as the Duchess of Marlborough. Earlier on, she's not the nicest person, but throughout the film, we do start to feel a bit sorry for her as Abigail slowly but surely tries to overthrow her as the favourite, as well as try and get her branded as a thief and a traitor, as she tries to make it look that she and her husband are having or taking a lot more money than they needed to. Although strangely enough, this is the Marlborough family. These are the ones who would build Marlborough Hall, which is where Winston Churchill was born. So these are his ancestors. So somehow their ancestors would have to come back to the country after the supposed banishment of Lord and Lady Marlborough. On a similar level, Abigail is a sympathetic and likeable character to begin with, but over time, her greed and lust for status and to become the Queen's favourite shortly after discovering the secret starts to turn her into an unlikable person and a bit of a kind of the villain of the picture. If you would say there's a protagonist-antagonist, I suppose both Marlborough and Abigail are the protagonists and antagonists. I should call her Sarah. Sarah and Abigail are both protagonists and antagonists, and both get on well most of the time, but not so well at other times. And it's kind of an uncertain relationship in places. But in earlier points, you sort of feel more sympathy for Abigail, and later on, you feel more for Sarah, as both are kind of the more protagonist. One is more protagonist early on, and one's more antagonist, and then it kind of swaps later on. There's also this odd scene where she's supposedly love playing with this MP guy who's taken a fancy to her. It's a bit odd. Is that how people in the late 17th, early 18th century toyed with the um, with courtship? Is that how they courted? Playing in the woods, making it look like the guy was after the girl, sort of a thing. It's a bit odd. A bit strange. It's also kind of a bit unfair on that guy when he does marry Abigail. That when she's drinking and partying, she's now getting the attention of other guys, and that's not even going into the development of how he feels about her relationship with the Queen, which is not explained. Then again, the same can be said for Sarah and her husband about whether Lord Marlborough feels anything about her being the favourite, or helping the Queen out so much. And that's really about it. I can say it's a very good in getting the period right, I think, and some great location filming and some great stuff. Some odd choices in cinematography with that fish lens and some shots, but other shots are really good looking and really good. But other shots are really great, and I really like that wide angle pan. When Abigail discovers this Sarah and Queen Anne's relationship, we get a shot of them, and then it pans up to Abigail. That's really good, and she's on a higher level, on a first level for a library bookcase thing. I think it's that scene. There's definitely one scene like that. Anyway, at least it's very well done. Also, the music in this film. Fun fact: this film doesn't actually have a proper soundtrack. It's not an original one anyway. It's music composed at the time, and there's some really great music in there. I had a listen when trying to find the music for this one, but there's one track I can't fucking stand, and it plays quite a bit. It's apparently 15 minutes, and it's this one where I think it's a violin strings very slowly. It sounds very like a strangled cat, and my god, damn it, get very ear rapey throughout the film. When it gets played, it's usually played in corridor scenes, or at least two main corridor scenes at points, and it's very ear rapey. But most of the other music is really great. But there is no original score. There's no one composer. It's all music from the time, which is both yay and nay. I guess it's both positive and negative. The positive is that they can use music more from that time, means it's more authentic and it's more like the time. But the negatives are that there are the occasional not very good bits. As I mentioned, the strangling the cat, ear rapey violin one that's played in a few corridor scenes, and just goes on and on and on. It feels like it goes on forever. God. That was probably the worst bit of that film. That one track, that one 15-minute track that's been split into a couple of scenes into the film. Just ear rapey. At least I think it was that 15-minute one anyway. It sounded like a violin door creaking cat strangle. It was horrible. But the rest of the music seemed fine for the most parts. Oh yeah, and the text is weird. Look, you can see it on the cover. The text, the font text, the way the letters are spread out, it's just weird. It's done in the credits, and that solidifies the Wes Anderson feel. Except I think Wes Anderson's movies are, or at least their credits are a bit more normal, or at least try to be a bit more normal. And this film does sort of feel like a Wes Anderson film, but without Wes Anderson involved at all. But it does have the odd feel, and it is a bit strange in places, but it's still a good film nevertheless. I went to this review not sure which score to give it, but I'm going to settle on an 8. I will be giving The Favourites an 8 out of 10. Yeah, I think it's a good film. I don't think it's particularly amazing. People who like art films, who aren't fans of big blockbusters, might like it more. or historical film likers might like it. It's not historically accurate, but it's good, and there's some great performances in there, including after this film. In fact, even after this DVD came out, Olivia Colman would get the Best Actress Oscar for her performance in this film. So it's a good film and has some interesting elements, but it does feel a bit weird in places. And why they need to chop the chapters up, again, Wes Anderson feel, is questionable. Anyway, so that's it from me. Thank you for watching this review, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. But later on you do think, actually, kind of, now we understand, although maybe, I don't know if... shut up! A former lady... And over time, Abigail, and some of them very redundant, such as the Brexit Party, because some parties, such as the Brexit Party, are redundant. Apart from the fact that Brexit Party is very redundant now, very. But anyway, like I said, it's not very clear what party's supposed to be which. One of them's the Whigs, one of them's the Conservatives. Like I said, it's not very clear which of them. But anyway, but that's not important. So anyone who's not a fan of the current big blockbuster, starts to turn her into a bit of a unlikable person. And also, it starts to... and again, neither is the Marlborough couples. Then again, neither is Lord Marlborough's... but the negative means that there's not really... It's other people to work without an original score. And this is... on the whole, The Favourite is a good... So I went into this Right, go on. I think the only non-Wes Anderson film in this the only non-Wes Anderson-esque trope in this film that they don't do is colour. It's not it's colourful, it's in colour as well, but it's not a wide range of bright colours everywhere like Anderson would, like how the Grand Budapest Hotel would have a lot of pink and red and orange. It's not that like that. It's not, there's lots of colours everywhere. It's just a normal colour scheme. Very brown in places, very grey, very brown, but just a normal colour scheme instead of a bursting Wes Anderson style colour scheme. So I think that's the only non-Wes Anderson. So I think that's the only Wes Anderson trope that they don't do for this one. As well. Actually, no, that's not the only one. Just cut that.